My next guest is no stranger to this story and Peter Strzok.
Days into your Russian collusion with the Trump campaign investigation, and you got another text from your colleague, Lisa Page. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And you replied, no, he's not. We'll stop it. I want to know what it meant, Agent Strzok.
It would be his candidacy.
In March of 2016, you wrote, God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. In March of 2016, weren't you investigating her for potential mishandling of classified information?
We were.
Had you interviewed her yet?
No, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
Just a sampling of some of the water that's gone under the bridge. Here now exclusively with his reaction to all of this tonight is Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina. Congressman, welcome. Good to have you here on the story tonight.
Yes,
were you surprised by this outcome, that he was fired at this point? And why do you think it happened now?
I think the process had just reached the point where it was a deputy director of Bowditch's desk. I mean, keep in mind, Peter Strzok received a much fairer process than what he was giving to Donald Trump. This was a referral by the Inspector General, who, if memory serves, was an Obama appointee. Michael Horowitz referred it. It was investigated by OPR. Strzok has a chance to defend himself and participate in the process and submit extra material, and then a recommendation is made with respect to punishment. And Deputy Director Bowditch is not a political appointee. He is a 23-year-long bureau agent who served with great distinction, including running the Los Angeles field office. That's who made the decision to terminate Peter Strzok. It was not a political appointee. It was a career G-man.
Well, his attorney doesn't agree with you. Here he is.
I don't think that you can rationally reach any conclusion other than it was political. It's difficult to believe, given the steady drumbeat of text demonizing Pete from the president and all the calls on Capitol Hill by Republicans for Pete to be fired, that didn't play a role in the Bureau's ultimate decision.
So he essentially says that you demonized Peter Strzok and that you played a role in his firing.
No, Peter Strzok didn't need any help at all demonizing himself. He had that fully covered. This is exactly what they said about Andy McCabe. Remember, some of my Democrat colleagues were going to hire Andy McCabe so he could finish out his time at the Bureau. I don't know if you remember that. I can't forget it. Peter Strzok, of course, his lawyer says that it was a railroad job. His only other option is to say, you know what, my client prejudged 2 major investigations. He made up his mind that Hillary Clinton was innocent before he interviewed her. He made up his mind that Donald Trump should be impeached before he bothered to interview him. And oh, by the way, he did a lot of this on the government phone, and he violated other FBI policy. That's his other option. Either say that or say it was political. And predictably, if you pay someone enough, Martha, they'll say damn near anything, particularly lawyers, and he got a lawyer who's willing to say it's political.
All right, so the Inspector General, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, also said that there were a few other FBI agents who had sent similarly biased and politically motivated, apparently, text messages. What's going on with them? Are we going to hear more about this investigation? And do you think that this Peter Strzok firing is enough in terms of the culture?
Well, Chairman Goodlatte and I have written asking for the names of those Bureau and DOJ employees. Apparently, according to DOJ and Bureau policy, they don't rise to the level of their names being shared with Congress. But they're, I'm sure, under investigation. Just like there was a referral from Horowitz on Strzok, there was a referral on these. Some of what they said is just unbelievable, particularly about their fellow citizens, particularly people who live in Ohio. You mentioned the smelling people in Virginia. They also had something really derogatory to say about folks in Ohio. So I am sure they will be afforded all of the process that they're due. But again, Martha, it is more than Strzok was willing to afford the President of the United States. They have a chance to defend themselves, and there will be a recommendation made, and then ultimately Deputy Director Bowditch will decide whether or not to follow it. You ask if it's enough. There have been 10 folks that were involved in the Hillary Clinton investigation and Donald Trump investigation that are no longer with the Bureau. Lots of them were really high up. instead of focusing on the firings, I have focused on the hirings. Chris Wray and David Bowditch, I am convinced, are going to be able to repair the institutional reputation of their bureau. 99.9% of the agents don't need their reputation improved because it's already really good, but they're going to take the FBI back to what we remember it being. So it's the two hirings that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, and you make a good point. I mean, the DOJ and the FBI have done house cleaning, clearly. So they clearly think that there was a problem with 10 individuals who were involved in this investigation, and they are no longer there. I want to ask you about these Bruce Orr text messages, because I'm curious what you think about him, because he's kind of been at the back of this story for a while. But now that we're reading, and I know you read quite a while ago, the message that he sent to Christopher Steele, who, of course, was the person behind the dossier. Here's one from July 1. I am seeing redacted person in London next week to discuss ongoing business, but there is something separate I wanted to discuss with you informally and separately. It concerns our favorite business tycoon. Your thoughts on that one?
Bruce Orr worked for the Department of Justice. He had absolutely nothing to do with the Russia investigation other than he inserted himself by having contact with Chris Steele. Martha even had contact with Chris Steele after the FBI terminated its relationship with Chris Steele. So this is one branch of the Department of Justice that says you're not even fit to be an informant. And here's a DOJ. I think he may have been third in command. We're going to interview him on August the 28th. I am going to come back to Washington. I'm going to leave my beloved South Carolina, and I'm going to go back, and I'm sure others will too. Jimmy and Mark and Ratcliffe, we're going to be back, and we're going to interview Bruce Orr, not in a public circus setting, but in a deposition with no time limits, and we're going to get to the bottom of what he did, why he did it, who he did it in concert with, whether he had the permission of the supervisors at the Department of Justice. It is, I used to work doing what Bruce Orr does now. It is unbelievable that a prosecutor would insert himself into an ongoing investigation for which he had nothing to do.
Yeah, well, one thing he had to do was that his wife worked for Fusion GPS, who was working on the dossier. And we will. Is that going to be open or closed testimony with Bruce Orr?
Yeah, we don't behave that well when the cameras are in there, Martha, so we're going to do it in a closed, confidential, private setting where everybody behaves, and it's much more constructive.
All right. I want to ask you about Rudy Giuliani and what he said this weekend with regard to perjury traps and whether or not the president should sit down with Robert Mueller. Let's play that.
There was no conversation about Michael Flynn. I think it was February when it supposedly took place. Memo came out in May. And in between, Comey testified under oath that in no way had he been obstructed at any time. And then all of a sudden, in May, he says he felt obstructed. He felt pressured by that comment. You should go easy on Flynn. So we maintain that the president didn't say that.
It was indicated prior to that statement that the president talked about it, but that he meant nothing by it, that it didn't constitute obstruction. So what do you make of all of this, Congressman?
Well, there are only two people that know whether or not it came up. One is President Trump, and the other is Jim Comey. I think the better line of analysis, and again, I'm not the president's lawyer, and he can do better than me, but there are four elements to perjury. It has to be under oath. It has to be material. It has to be intentional. The falsehood has to be intentional. I think the president, if he doesn't remember that coming up, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. I don't remember, or that's not what I recall, or I don't think I phrased it that way. Martha, I will tell you this. If it is obstruction of justice to ask someone to show leniency, then we're going to have to build a lot more prisons in this country, and there are going to be preachers in most of them. For 20 years, I had preachers call me and ask me to please give this person a second chance. Please show some leniency. That is not obstruction of justice. That is what happens all across this country every day. And Jim Comey must not have felt obstructed because he kept working for the guy, and he wants, if it were up to him, he'd still be working for the guy.
Yeah, and he claimed in open testimony that no one had interfered with his investigation. I have to go, but I want to ask you one more quick question. In the Manafort trial, the judge appears to have been quite hard on Mueller's team. You have been very supportive and a proponent of the integrity of Mueller's team. Did what you hear in there affect your opinion about that at all?
It affects my opinion on the judge. The fact that you and I are talking about a judge, they're supposed to be neutral, detached arbiters, referees, umpires. The fact that he inserts himself, whether I supported the prosecution or the defense, is immaterial. Judges are not active participants in the trial. And I've been in front of some tough ones. I've never been in front of one who enjoyed hearing his name and enjoyed being the star of the show as much as this one. And I frankly feel sorry for the lawyers on both sides that they're having to put up with a judge who is confusing himself with the deity.
Congressman Trey Gowdy, always good to see you, sir. Thank you very much
Yes,
for coming
ma'am,
in tonight. You bet.